Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, listeners. I'm back with another episode of Coffee Chats with Aisha. Today's episode is going to be all about filmmaking, behind the lens, the filmmaking journey, and the creative process as well, as shared by our special guest here today. Listeners, you'll be taking away reflections on the intricate world of cinematic creativity, exploring the secrets and inspirations that shape a filmmaker's vision and bring stories to life, on YouTube and different platforms, as shared by our guest, Nadifah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you?
Assalam, how are you? I'm great.
Doing well. Well, y'all, she's amazing. Let me give you a little bit of a background for her to set the stage. Nadifah is a visual and literary artist, specifically having a focus being fine art, film, and poetry. She produces work aiming to connect her audience and community with her own story, hoping for them to potentially find a piece of familiarity within it. She expands her creative experiences into beautifully crafted words, design, and moving pictures. Awesome. Oh my God. I'm really, really excited to chat with all things film, all things your process, because I personally love your videos as well. I will link her down below. Guys, she's amazing. So, before we get started, fun icebreaker question. Do you like coffee?
Like is an understatement. I literally have a coffee right here. I love coffee. I made it before we got on, but I absolutely love coffee.
Any specific order that you have?
Cappuccino, hazelnut, light on the sugar.
Okay, she's ready. She knows what she wants. I love that. Awesome. Well, we're gonna set the stage here tonight. I would love for this to be literally, quite literally, a behind the scenes of your entire process, right, from start to finish, so that our listeners can take away every bit and piece about how you produce what you do. So before we get to behind the scenes, would love to focus on you. Who's the creative behind the scenes? So would love to ask, why do you create? And, what mediums do you create on or from?
Yeah. So why do I create? For me, being an artist, it's almost like, why do I communicate? I think that the best way for me to place my feelings into something that is like legible and understandable for me is to create it. So I think that to be an artist is way more deeper than just the producing of it. It takes so much, at least for me, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but for me personally, it takes so much inner work within myself to be able to produce work. I know, like growing up, I've never been a big STEM person, was never super academically based in that notion, but I've always been a creator. And I like to look at intelligence as something being very subjective. And so you can be a genius in cooking, you can be a genius in mechanics, you can be a genius in anything. But for me, it was visual arts. That is something that just came innate to me. And so I like to look at the reason why do I create as a way of expounding upon my emotions in a way that takes a lot of skill. It does take a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of intelligence to be able to convert very intricate, deep rooted perspectives, feelings, and experiences to something that other people can internalize and view.
Yeah,
So
that's
that takes like
incredible.
it takes a lot. Yeah.
Oh my God, amazing. Um, And so specifically, we've talked about this before in, private conversations. Would love to hear, how does your own philosophy, your own perspectives, specifically shaped within, the Islamic lens, influence your creative decisions? Because you've talked about producing, showcasing your personal views through a creative and Islamic lens. So what does that mean? What does that look like for you?
In so many ways. I know we have conversations before. We was touching on like homemaking within like creating art and things like that. And I'm sure we're gonna tap into like deeper forms of that conversation. But for me, I grew up in a Muslim household, so Islam is like it feels like home to me. It feels like something very familiar. And I think that like I didn't become very, very endorsed into my Islamic beliefs until maybe like 4 years ago. And so it didn't start to influence my art in a deep way until then. But prior to that, it had influences before me even realizing that it had influences on me. Like I would go to the masjid, and just like the way that masjids are built, the Arabic on the walls and the way the rugs are, like the designs and like the intricateness in like the ways the buildings in the masjids are structured had an influence on my art before I even realized it had an influence on my art. I would be very particular on the ways that I would design the borders of my art. And I know previously there was actually something fairly recently, maybe like the last like 3 years ago, how I said that I started to become closer to Islam. So the ways that I did my art in the past, I had to completely shift it because of my deen. So growing up, I was very, very much into doing portraitures and like painting people. Like that was like my big thing that I used to do. And so once I started to, grow a deeper love for Islam and develop my deen and just learn more and strengthen my iman, that was something that I was no longer doing anymore. So I had to make a complete shift. And honestly, it wasn't even something that I missed, because it's like as soon as I realized that that wasn't something that was aligned with my Islamic beliefs, I just cut it off. But I can say that it did create like a rerouting, so to speak. Like I had to completely shift the way that I was creating for years. But yeah, I had to make a complete shift on the way that I created. And that was really, really good, like with painting faces, like to the point where it was like very semi-realistic. And so I know that when I was in college, for the times that I were in college, my teacher would be like, "Why are you stopping with portraitures?" Like it was confusing to most, but for me, I knew that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me with these talents this far, I will be blessed with even further ways to be able to create. And so there was no hesitation within me. So I'm like, okay, we're rerouting. And so alhamdulillah, I actually came back to, I've still taken a break from painting. I'm just trying to figure out which routes I want to take with it. But film has also always been something for me. But how I was saying in the beginning, academic when it came to like those type of core subjects, but with creativity was always for me. So I've always done poetry. I've always done filmmaking. I've always painted, sung, did like different types of, it was very easy for me to kind of jump and dabble into different elements of creating, just because it's just how I show a piece of me to the world. It's kind of like people have big projects for like findings projects or business projects. For me, it's my artistic abilities. Like that is what I have to offer. And so when it came to me switching over from taking a break from doing painting, so I can find a way to align my artistic abilities with my Islamic beliefs. So that's when I started to do films and started to like do poetry, and like I even like have some videos in the works that like I have visuals over reciting surahs. Like there's certain things that I'm trying to push closer to, so I'm able to align the things that I'm working on, align my work with my deen, because it shouldn't be something that is separate. Like it should, like deen means way of life, so it should be something that is all connected with one another.
Yeah. No, I love that. And to pick on a few things that you said that I really resonate to is, we're rerouting. That it was, you literally didn't hesitate. You didn't hesitate when it came to, as you learn more about your deen, you figured out how best to pivot your artistic journey based on you choosing God, really, you choosing the deen first and foremost, and figuring out what the rest looks like. Because yes, if you were blessed with a talent, use it for good. And I love that you were able to find and almost, shift and change up what you needed to do, but still be a creative in that sense. And so this next question talks on change and embracing change. So what would you say, in what ways do you embrace change? And specifically, what does that look like in terms of using that as a catalyst for your own artistic growth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I try not to separate the things that I've learned in the past with lessons that I'm enduring now. So what I mean by that is things that I've learned when I was 12, none of those went away. It's just building blocks. So when I look at change, I actually get super excited. I get really excited because it means that I'm learning a new way of thinking. I'm learning a new lesson. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rerouting me and presenting me with a new challenge, something else that I can tackle. And with challenges, it triggers different things for me internally. So I may, for example, moving to Somalia, my creativity has been out the out the gate. simply because I've been so out of my comfort zone. And for me personally, like my Somali is not the best. So like being able to communicate with people the way I want to has been like isolating internally. So it's been triggering some things within me that I have like insecurities around. But within that, it offers an opportunity for me to learn more about myself, and how I tapped on before about like being an artist is doing the inner work and being able to like expound upon that creatively. So this whole big shift, this very huge change has offered me an opportunity to dig even a little bit deeper and be able to find a way to tell that story. And like, you know how they say, you really know about a topic if you're able to explain it to people that don't know about it. So like a doctor, you can tell a doctor is very intelligent if they're able to explain something very complex to a 7-year-old. So if you're able to take this very big feeling, this very big experience, this insecurity, this uncertainty, and then be able to execute it in a way that's not even in the same language. It's not even in the same language. So having the ability to do that will mean that you fully can understand what you're feeling in that moment. And that's like so empowering to me, because it makes me feel like, okay, I'm figuring something out. Like, it's like I'm working through it. Some people use that for journaling. Some people use that it's like so many different outlets, but for me, it's visual and literary arts. And like the change fires me up. To be honest, I may feel like a little restless if I'm not having a little bit of change. I think the change kind of gives me the fuel to see something in a different perspective. And if I don't have that change, sometimes I look to like find it, because there's always something to learn. There's always something to dig deeper on. Islam is a big, has a big message of learning and like searching for knowledge. So I think you can find a lot of knowledge through changing your environment, changing your perspective, you know. And that's what I try to do. And that's a huge catalyst to my art, a huge catalyst, because a lot of my art is through my own personal perspective and through my personal lens. And I just like, you know, develop those feelings, develop those perspectives and those thoughts into something that is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful indeed. I love that. That's so beautiful that you can sometimes change is scary to people, and you embracing it and saying, I'm going to make the best out of this change, or you are really tracking your own course with you know, Allah on your side, and trust and full trust that you're going to make it in the direction and spaces and opportunities you're going to deserve. So that's really cool to hear. So speaking about like filmmaking specifically, how do you use your voice, or how do you like leverage your voice and your own visual abilities to spread inspiration through films? Because I know we talked about this concept of really wanting to put out, you know, inspiration and wanting you to connect with the community you're growing, so that people can find some sort of familiarity within your films. How do you go about that? How do you use your voice and visual capabilities to do so?
Yeah, I think like how I was saying before with the personal experience, I think that's something that's like a connecting like thread through all of us, is like our connection to what's the one truth, right? It's our connection. So that falls into like values and feelings and all these things. And so with film, I try to do my best with conveying my feelings to a point where it feels like I try to use my experiences and my feelings and like apply them to visuals. And so the way I would do this, I'm gonna give an example. I'm a very like analogy type of person. So let's say I'm trying to demonstrate feelings of, in my case, like internal loneliness, like how I'm not able to communicate like how I'm communicating with you right now. It's very difficult for me to do that in depth in Somali, at least right now. Inshallah, I'll get better. But the feelings of feeling internally isolated. So immediately I think of like an area with no trees, just a skyline, a flat surface. It feels very isolated, and then one figure in the middle. Already that feels very isolating. And so what I would do with my words in that example, I may like layer my words. So I may have a poem and I might say one word, and then in post editing, I will layer something right over it. And so not only does it now feel like very isolating, but it also feels a little like anxiety inducing, because like, okay, why is it so layered? But I'm also alone. So with those visuals, with those words, it kind of conveys emotions and feelings. And then that may honestly, so for some viewers, it may feel a little triggering. It may spark something in you, right? but the sense that I think something that humans are really good at, and sometimes we don't realize that we're really good at feeding through and finding what's authentic and what's not when it comes to people. So we can really have a good gauge for authenticity very quickly, right? Whether we know it or not. And so if we see someone and they're being very vulnerable and they're being very honest and they're being very true to themselves, it allows the audience to be like, oh, well, I guess I can be pretty honest too right now and be vulnerable. Even if they don't know they're doing it, it's like the more someone's being honest and being vulnerable, being true to themselves, it allows the viewer to kind of sit back and just watch. And then also be able to pick things that are familiar within their experience and apply it to theirs. I think that the common thread that makes something, what's the word? Well, it was something that you used particularly. It was like, how do I leverage my voice to use inspiration? So I think that inspiration comes through honesty, and it also connects through honesty as well. So with me being very, very raw with my feelings, it allows the audience to kind of see deeper into how I see things. And sometimes words are a very powerful tool. It's a very, very powerful tool. And sometimes we don't have the words for what we're feeling. And I keep circling back on this whole thing of like artists and having the ability to dig deeper and like really do the inner work and like to take that and put it in something visual and something auditorial. It makes you like, wow, like I was feeling that all this time and I didn't realize that I was feeling that until I heard the words that were in congruence to those feelings. And so I think that sparks inspiration like no other. Like honesty is like a huge catalyst for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said that honesty, allows for inspiration because it's just all of it. I mean, I resonate to it, especially that take on, authenticity. We're so good at it and you don't understand per se why. And so you can see right through any sort of piece of content, whether it's poetry, whatever it might be. And if you just, for lack of better word, like if you don't feel anything, it's perhaps because that piece wasn't authentic. Because it didn't come from the heart. Like it was put together, whatever it might be, right? Art is so grand and stuff, but I love that you kind of pinpointed that piece of it. So to conclude this first section about just you, the creative, like who you are as a creative, would love to hear about maybe perhaps one specific project that you could share with us where your artistic expression was deeply rooted in your own personal beliefs.
Yeah. So how I said previously, like the art that I did in the past doesn't align with the trajectory of where I'm going now. So there's nothing I can like visually show just because I don't want to show those things anymore, but I can talk about it. So I did have a lot of projects like in my freshman year and my sophomore year of college where I had a very, very long series. I called it Five because it was in intervals of 5 of my life. So like starting from 5 to 10, 10 to 15. And I had self-portraits of me and my family, of us essentially not reenacting, but essentially creating the world of how I felt within those particular moments. So each one had certain lessons. So the first 5 to 10, it was like, I think the name of it was a simulation. And so it was just me getting used to the world, me kind of finding my place in the world, finding out who I was. And then I had those through series of like portraits, and not only portraits, but like also like scenic type of things, scenic paintings. And all of it was painting, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that 100%, but all of them were like large scale paintings. And it was just walking through my life. It was very interpersonal. And I think that like someone that was pretty privy on dissecting art will be able to be like, oh, she gave her heart and put everything on there. So I was very, very vulnerable. So I led those 5 all the way up to 20. I'm 22 now. I led all of those up to 20. And yeah, so it was about like 4 pieces of sections of art. And it took a lot of time. It was very intricate, but it was basically me coming into my womanhood, and me stepping into that. And then also all the characteristics I had and challenges I went through shame, through uncertainty, through doubt, through not feeling good enough, having anxiety. I grew up with a whole bunch of siblings. So just finding my place in the world and finding my voice and being able to strengthen that. And what does that look like visually? Like, and how comfortable are you to talk about the uncomfortable doing that? So like that was things that I was challenging myself on as I was painting it. And the thing about painting, it takes a long time. So I have to really sit and really think while I'm spending 10 hours on one painting. to walk through everything and remembering how uncomfortable I felt when I experienced a scary moment, or like how grateful was I when I was blessed this, alhamdulillah. Like everything was like put on those, and I want to find a way, because I have that presence, since that's something that doesn't align with where I'm in now. So I want to find a way to do that, something similar to that once again, with painting, with film, with poetry, but have it be a way that's aligned. But yeah, I think most of my work that I create is all through a personal lens. Even though the videos that I have on YouTube, all of it's like my deep rooted feelings towards something. But a lot of people relate. Alhamdulillah, like I'm glad that I'm able to connect with people. But all of it's through my personal lens. That's all I really know. At least I can tell a deep story about, is what I've experienced. So yeah, all of them honestly are deep rooted. But that's a particular project. It was called
Yeah.
Five. But I want to make something that I feel like is as vulnerable as that was.
Mm.
But yeah, but headed to where I'm going now. Yeah.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Super cool to hear. So we'll pivot to understanding more so the behind the scenes of your filmmaking, of the process in its entirety, which I'm so excited to jump into, based on my initial conversations with you. So you talked about this, being uncomfortable, being
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with being uncomfortable, and sort
Yes.
of challenging things that come your way. So how do you do that? I mean, how do you address the unsaid or challenge conventions through your artistic expression?
Hmm. I keep going into inner work, and I feel like your viewers may get tired of me, but it's so crucial doing the inner work, because I would say that 90% of my creative process is me thinking, and 10% is me executing. Like so much of it is me thinking. Like it's I'm we're I know we have other questions and things like that we're gonna tap on. So I'm gonna go deeper into just like the exact ways that I think. But as far as this particular question of just how do I convey the unseen and the challenges and things like that, it takes so much honesty that is sometimes internally painful to just say it like bleakly. It's I don't think it's a word, but to say it bleak. Um it takes so much honesty. And I think that like sometimes you even have moments where I will allow my ego to get in the way. So for example, with me saying that I'm afraid, my ego will be like, no, you're not, girl. You're not afraid. But it's like, but I am. Like, deep down I am afraid for whatever the scenario is. And so I have to sometimes, like sometimes I'll want to create, but it'll be in a way that's not authentic and not honest. I'll find myself just doing it just for the action. So that's why that I have to gear myself to making it to be 90% me thinking and reflecting and just walking through why why I think about something, how I think about something, and what is it, and like really ask those questions deeply, and like even when I answer them, get even deeper than that. So let's say I'm gonna keep using the example of just being afraid and feeling isolated, just because that's the one I brought up initially. So I'll be like, okay, why do I feel isolated? And then the answer would be, I just really love to communicate with people. That's my love language. My love language is speech. I love to do it that way. Okay, why is your love language speech? I've had so many siblings, and like I have to kind of find my place in the world and always have to talk and feel like I have to hurry up and get my place in. Okay, why is that? So it's like you just keep getting deeper and deeper. And then even while you're doing that, you're like allowing yourself to trust yourself. One, you're allowing yourself to listen to yourself. Because we always want people to like listen to how we're feeling and things like that. But sometimes you have to allow yourself to listen to how you're feeling. Like instead of just like, closing the door consecutively and like burying up those feelings, because whether you bury those feelings or not, they're there. And there was this book I was reading. Ooh, what was it? I think the trauma keeps score, or the body keeps score. The body keeps score. I was doing an audiobook on that. And it was discussing how trauma really finds its way to like your body. Like it will like store itself in our bodies. I know for women, we have a lot of trauma stored in our hips. So whether you acknowledge these traumatic feelings or not, it's gonna find its way still in you. It's gonna resurface regardless. And so I think that like doing something, not even just art, but doing something to like acknowledge what you're feeling is so necessary. So like those challenges are very crucial. And that's why I think that it was a long time in my life where I would like emphasize the execution of me finishing something. But now the execution simply cannot happen if I don't do the work. And I'm not even talking about the physical work. I'm talking about me walking through the deeper rooted feelings. And like, that is the most challenging thing. That is the most challenging thing. But it's so necessary because not only am I creating something beautiful that's inspiring, I'm also like, peeling the onion layers of myself and like really like peeling back the onion layers of myself and being able to dig deeper to the root of whatever the problem is in that particular scenario. So like that will be the most difficult, but also the most rewarding. I don't look at difficulty or suffering as something derogatory. Like I think like as Muslims, we just have this like innate like faith and like in belief that like even when things are like a little bit hard, it's like, well, there's something I can learn from this. But like just having like a optimistic view on everything because we have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So like even when things are difficult, it's difficult in like in a manageable way though.
Yeah, exactly. You will not be burdened against your capacity, and that's one of the ayahs I always reflect on. And of course, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, with hardship comes ease, knowing that you are going through all these tests for a reason. Like you said, you just need to find out, thereafter the hindsight, you're going to understand what lessons were learned through that process of navigating those trials and hardships. That's so cool. I mean, inner work is needed, and it's like you said, the toughest part of doing anything. And I think beyond even, work, just any part of something that you're getting done, you need to do the work internally first before you can execute, replicate, produce, whatever you want to call it. It starts with you first. So speaking about, how do you get through, or how do you approach world building through your imagery in your own filmmaking specifically? So you talked about, you're addressing, you're doing the inner work, and then how you navigate, actually building that world, that scenery, through your imagery and through your filmmaking.
Yeah, for sure. So it was an element of what I said before that I was going to touch on. But I feel like this is more synonymous with this response. So I know I talk to my sister a lot. I think I actually have this conversation a lot in general about the ways that artists think is the ways that we create. So for me, with world building, that is just how I think, And so when I was younger, like how I was saying before, I have a lot of siblings, and so there was a lot of times where a lot of things would go unnoticed. And so I would have to kind of create my own little like world in my head to return to. And it got to the point where I got really good at it. So I would create worlds and I would remember them to the T. So I would remember like how certain plants I made look, and I will return back to it and kind of create like a whole thing, right? And so when I'm creating like film, I use film for particularly when I'm creating films, I try to think about every single element. I walk through all the five senses. Like, okay, so how does this world like smell? What does it smell like? And so what do I hear when I'm here? Like, do I hear like birds chirping? Do I hear like wind blowing? Is there like rain? What if I felt something? Does it hurt my fingers when I touch the plants there? Or is it something that's smooth and soft? They kind of like lay on the grass easily. Or is it grass? Or is it, it's like I walk through all of those. Like, what is it? What is it? What does it taste like? If I were to eat a fruit or something like that, what does it taste like? And so all those things will help me figure out like the location. It will help me figure out the color scheme. It will help me figure out what words am I using while I'm doing this film. Are there any words? Is it just sounds? Is it just is there close-ups? Is there far outs? Like it helps like being able to know what the world looks like if you were actually there. Because if you were actually there, you would know all these things. You would know how it felt. You would know, like, so having to walk through those. And I guess the deeper question is, how do you convey that? Like, you can't taste something visually. You can't like, can't smell something visually, but you can kind of use certain colors to like induce that. Like, for example, like certain food places use particular colors to make you hungry. Like they'll use like reds and I think yellows and some other colors. Can't think on the top of my head, but there was a whole article I read on that. But there's certain colors that will induce certain feelings. And so I try to like dig a little bit deeper with color theory. And that's how like my painting kind of aspects kind of flow through my film. Is if I wanted to feel at home, if I want this world to feel something cozy and at home, I may use like warmer colors, but not too dark where it's black. I may use a brown, or I may use colors that are like on the color wheel be harmonious with one another and complementary to one another, like green and red, or purple and yellow. Like those are harmonious. So even when you don't realize it, it's your brain is kind of like, this is nice. This feels harmonious. This feels good. So that makes you feel calm. But if I wanted something to feel like more like kind of anxiety inducing, I may use something like red and blue, because it's like they're kind of like really close to each other and they're both like a primary color. So it's like two very polar opposites close to each other. So that kind of makes you feel like you're not in danger, but it may put like a feeling up your spine and makes you feel a little bit more alert. So there's certain things that you would use. And then that in combination with the sound. So if I use something that is more home inducing and I have like a humming, like this feeling angelic and nice and beautiful, you'd be like, oh, this is beautiful, this is nice. But if I have like the red and blue example, and I have like some very hard winds going, you're like, okay, so this world is like, it's making me on edge, a little eerie. So all those things come into play because you have to play with the senses. I think world building is having the ability to not manipulate, but like play on the feelings that the viewer may be having. Sorry, I'm not sure if you heard my yeah on the background. Sorry. But yeah, so you have to play with those five senses in order to like evoke a certain experience. And they do that everywhere. Like I think the more that like you start to learn, you know how when you learn about something and then like you watch something and you see it, you're like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah. I study marketing, and so every time I see an ad or something, I'm like, I know what you did there. I know what you're doing.
Yeah, I get it. So like that's kind of how it happens with me. Because it wasn't always like that. It wasn't always something that I was like really I utilized. But now where I'm in this particular part of my like filmmaking, I guess, career, that's something I utilize a lot with world building. And I think it's been very crucial. And inshallah, I'll get better over time.
Inshallah. That's so cool. I mean, you talked about experience. I think I picked it up. So I would love to, I think, maybe understand all these things that you're doing intentionally with the five senses, the color theory that you mentioned, all this stuff to evoke feelings, to evoke and unlock something that you're trying to communicate to your audiences. So can you walk us through that storyboard process and specifically like what is that impact on emotional storytelling?
You know what's funny? I don't really write too much down. Like I know like in the past I used to take like filmmaking courses. Like I had like a teen filmmaking course. We had to like produce a film and then we ended up being like this indie Memphis festival or whatever. So and we used to have to do that. We used to have to write the little squares and like, do the storyboards and have all these things. But now I like it. This may sound very odd, but I feel like it kind of takes away some of it for me when I do that. Like how I was saying before, like I can walk through everything in my mind very easily because I've been doing it since I was a little girl. Like that's kind of been my I guess coping mechanism before I like, started to develop more like spiritual coping mechanisms. But like before, like, that's how I used to have my own little safe haven. I would like think of something. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to be in this little world. And so since I'm so good at that, that's just a tool that I have more accessible to me. So when I would take what I see and I put it on paper, it's almost like, I don't want to say diminishing its value. I feel like that's a crazy way of putting it, but like it's what it feels like. And it almost, it's like I'm really related, but it has the same effect. So it's like, let's say you want to work out, and then you wrote a whole plan of your whole schedule that you want to work out. Then you tell everyone in your family, this is my plan, someone work out, I'm gonna do this. And then like they congratulate you. So you get that satisfaction without actually working out. So you don't actually work out. You don't end up doing it. So that's the same sentiment for me when I take what I'm seeing in my head and then I put it on paper and I see everything. Every time I do that, I find for myself that I don't do it. And but that's not the same for like words. Like when my poetry, there's moments I write it, but sometimes I just kind of speak it or however I'm feeling that day. But specifically when it comes to visuals, I have to keep it in my head and then do it. Like it has to go like a very direct transfer in my head to like execution, because for me, I'm able to keep tabs in my head so vividly that if I take it and I put it somewhere else, it's not, it doesn't hold the same weight. But that does not mean like I don't create like vision boards and stuff like that. Like I don't create like Pinterest boards. That's a little bit different. But as far as like direct like storyboarding and like saying, okay, I'm gonna do this next, for me, that it's like I'm using up all that creative momentum and then using this, and then I end up not doing the project.
Yay. For
So
sure.
I used to think it was odd, but it's just my process. It's just how I do it. And so with all of my videos, like this one I'm working now, like I'm actually taking kind of quite a while to post it on my channel because this one has so many more elements. And like for me, I'm going to keep doing something until it looks the way it looks in my head. So if I have like a certain shot that I want to get, I've been constantly shooting and re-editing and and I'm like, I
Yeah.
would rather it take longer than I expected and be good rather than me just putting something out and it's not looking
Yeah.
like how I want it to look like. So
Absolutely.
I like I said before, the 90% thinking and the 10% execution. So the process of me thinking would take probably a long time. I like
Yeah.
walk through everything. I think about the sounds and then I'll look up certain things. Like say if I curated this world in my head, I'm like, I'm missing the sound. I would look up certain sounds. Also, too, all of my storyboarding comes from things that Lost Poems I already created. So everything in nature is like things I use as reference. So a lot of my B-roll may be like nature things or maybe something that already exists. But like as I'm going through this storyboard in my brain, I will look up things to kind of add to what I already have. So I'll be like, I need some bird noises. I will look up a bird noise. I'm like, that's not the right bird. I'll look up another bird. And I'll be like, I don't know, until I get the right bird. And then I listen to that and then I place it into the world.
Yeah.
I feel like I sound insane.
No, that's so cool. I mean, that's the thing. It's so beautiful the way people create, like art.
Yeah.
And that's totally such a valid process. I love to hear that. So then like in that regard, then I'll pivot to understanding how you do emotional storytelling. Specifically, then what other filmmaking techniques do you incorporate to evoke those feelings, those specific feelings, particular emotions, to create a sense of comfort, home in your visual storytelling? So whatever you're trying to communicate, I would love to hear about how you go about figuring out how to communicate those like feelings.
Yeah, I would say it's different each time. I would say as of lately, specifically since I started my YouTube, I've noticed that I've been leaning more on the sound and the poetic approach of it, and then making the visuals. So as far as the layout with that, I will. These last few poems I did honestly came like very natural. Like I was just honestly just speaking into my phone, and then I kind of cut them, and so it could be. So I would speak it into my phone and then I would cut them. And so there'd be like a cohesive story. So after I cut them, and then I think I will have like a whole allotted amount of visuals because I already curated the world in my head. And so I will place the visuals that kind of feels like they're paralleling with the words that I'm saying. So it kind of like it lines up. But that's also me using everything else that I just said with the colors and all the things on all the senses and everything that I mentioned previously. And so that's a technique that I use, is like leaning on the audio first and playing the visuals afterwards. Something else that I do, there's a lot of filmmakers that like I'm very inspired by. I'm gonna send you a few that you could probably even link down below. It's a lot of like I can't remember them off the top of my head, so I can send them to you. But they have beautiful, beautiful, beautiful films, and they're all Muslim, and they create very intricate work. And so I get a lot of inspiration from other artists and like the ways that they like get more technical with the film and like knowing the angles and knowing which ones to do and which one like will be smoother if I transition into this and transition into that. Like those technical things like I'm learning along the way. I feel like most of the skill that I have is like just having an eye for composition, having an eye for like style. Like sometimes some people just have it and then some people it has to be learned. For me, the technical things, like knowing what I'm actually doing, like what's the name of it, that's something I'm learning along the way. And so I find it very beautiful when all those things kind of flow together. Like I think about it like water. If it just flows together, if it feels like it fits, and it's kind of like it doesn't feel like if you're like listening to someone talk, you do podcasts. So if you're like listening and then like you feel like this weird like
There's a
yeah, like a weird abrupt
there's a
moment.
break. There's like some sort of rigid yeah, I feel that.
So the same thing can apply visually. Like if you're watching it, okay, that kind of cut weird. Like I think me jumping from a wide shot close to a close-up shot, that could be cool if you're trying to evoke like like a
jarring.
film, like,
Yeah.
it's like a
Yeah.
jarring feeling. But if I'm not trying to do that and it doesn't feel cohesive with the poem, it doesn't feel cohesive with the color scheme, if everything isn't flowing well, then I have to cut and do a medium shot instead, like a more like maybe I'll use like a 50 millimeter camera instead of like lens, instead of like what I was using before. And so I would just do that and kind of play with that before. And so I'll rewatch it a whole bunch of times too. So I would say that's like I think you said technique. Like the technique I would use would be ensuring that it flows easily, aiding to the audio first. At least that's what I'm doing now. Aiding to the audio first and having it be congruent with the visuals. And it also layering sounds too. So like there's certain times I will have like maybe like humming or like just like a drum beat or something like that, or just nature sounds. And there's moments I will cut it and I will break it if I'm saying something that I want to really emphasize. So like things like that, I would do that. Um, I Once I'm in the post editing stage, I keep my viewers in mind. I think like before when I'm creating all the visuals and the when I'm doing the art of it, it's all me. But when I'm editing, I'm like, okay, if I was an audience and I was watching this, how would they be? How would they internalize this? And so what will be the most smoothest effect? And what am I trying to convey? I go back to like my why to during that process too. So yeah, I try to make sure it's an easily consumable piece of work as
Yeah.
much as possible, inshallah.
That's awesome. Love to hear that. So I heard a lot about, the why, the putting together, what feels like the film, right? The process behind it, how you're really intentional, which is so, so beautiful to hear. I'm sure, even your audiences that watch this or listen to this will understand that everything that you post is so meticulously, well thought out, all, behind, understanding, and like you said, going back to the why. I'd love to now pivot, and sort of end our conversation to kind of understand your own evolution as a filmmaker, like the big picture behind everything that you've gone through and how you adapted and pivoted perhaps. So this first question here that I have is, how has your filmmaking style, evolved over the course of your career?
There was an art teacher I had once, and he told me, it was like in high school, it was like AP, and what he said really just stuck with me. He was like, you're going to find the beginning stages of your art career, you're going to find yourself copying off a lot of people until you're not. And so that's so true. You're going to find yourself like kind of like taking pieces and copying off of people. I mean, nothing's really original, but like copying people's styles and people's things, like people's like themes and way they approach their art. Until you start creating your own motifs and you start expanding on them and expanding on them and expanding on them until they become your own. And I would say that would be the biggest like change from beginning stages of filmmaking. Because I didn't start doing filmmaking, unlike my poetry and unlike my like painting, like that's something I've been doing since I was a young girl, and acting and things like that. But with filmmaking, I don't think that I started filmmaking until I was about 16. So I was about 16, that's when I started doing it. So between 16 and 22, 16, I was definitely just kind of like copying up the movies I like. and my movie inspiration, honestly, was a lot of cheesy rom-coms for being transparent. And so a lot of the films that I had that I entered into those indie festivals that I was referring to before, it would be like these little like comedy films about like coming of age type of stories, because that's what I was consuming as far as like films. Until I start to broaden my inspiration and also learn more about myself, like how I mentioned so much throughout this, and then also expanding on those motifs and like getting to the point where I'm no longer sourcing my inspiration from other creatives, but I'm sourcing them through my own experiences and through the work that I've made. That would be the biggest change. And like also too, I didn't understand color gradients. I didn't understand like having good cuts that aren't abrupt and weird. I didn't understand really good angles and how to tell stories through visuals in that way because I've always been a painter. So it's just still like you can have an angle, but that angle is that angle. Like, you know what I'm saying? When you're looking at the painting, it's not a motion picture. So transitioning the composition that I do know through painting, but moving it to filmmaking, you could see like I was stumbling a little bit. If like, if my films existed in the world now, they don't, but like things that I just haven't, I look back at them now. Yeah, I would say that the things that I've learned definitely was just getting more technical and getting more skilled at it, and like actually learning what I'm doing, learning the words to the techniques, and yeah, just transitioning from still pictures to motion pictures, and developing my own style. And like I think that like this is the first time in my life now, especially like the videos that I have in in my in my vault that I plan on putting out. I think that I am designating like a really particular style. So alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful for the way that I'm growing into my art and growing into my creative abilities, because I do really, really love it. Um, but yeah, I would say it changed just with me maturing, me growing up, and me learning more about the craft.
Yeah. I, I mean, absolutely. Like you said, you are experiencing your own coming of filmmaking tale. And as you experiment, practice makes perfect, but experimentation is super important to figure out really what works for you and what doesn't, and figuring out your own style. So I love to hear that. And so speaking of, I feel like when we talk about experimentation, we also, um, you know, thinking about challenging ourselves, really motivating ourselves to think beyond. And so, in what ways do you challenge yourself to experiment with new techniques, new filmmaking like processes? Like, what does that look like in terms of figuring out the new thing, or whatever that process looks like for experimentation?
This is a really good question. Honestly, you have so many good questions. I don't think I said that. Like you are very, very like well detailed in your questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
For challenges, I think that if I find myself getting a little too comfortable, I feel like I have to shake it up. And since I have like a lot of talents, alhamdulillah, like a lot of talents that I have, I try to find ways to incorporate them, even in ways that like initially I wouldn't think fit. And so also to challenging myself to use things that I do already know and find a way to like expound upon. Like right now, I'm trying to learn like After Effects and like learn how to use Photoshop really well and Lightroom and all those things on Adobe on the cloud service, whatever it's called. But essentially, like being able to take what I do know and move it to something that may be more visual is a challenge. Like because I'm trying to find the best way to incorporate my paintings and my art in my film. And so that on its own is like a current challenge I'm going through. But I would say the overall encompassing thing is just finding ways to allow all of my artistic abilities to exist harmoniously together in one piece. Like, is that possible? How would I do that? What does that look like to use my poetry, but also using my acting abilities, but also using my poetry abilities, but also using my artistic abilities? What does that look like? And will it be cluttered? How do you make it feel all cohesive? That's a challenge. Also, to being able to step myself, making sure that I'm not being redundant in my work is something that's big too, specifically with like my poetry. And like since a lot of my visuals aid with my poetry, if the poetry is the same, the visuals may feel the same. And so there's a thin line between like creating your own like artistic thing, but also being redundant. So I'm trying to like make sure that everything's always fresh and I'm always like um looking at it with a new eye. Like I know when I'm doing a painting, there's like that particular teacher that I brought up before, he told me a lot of things that I keep returning back to, but this was something else he said too. Like he said, if you're painting something, you're so close to it and you're painting it. So it's like, put your painting 50 feet away from you and look at it. Then stand 20 feet away from you. Like look at it from a different angle, because you're going to see something that you was not seeing when you were this close to it. So the same thing with film. If sometimes I edit on my phone, sometimes I edit on my computer, but if I'm sitting in my room bundled up on a bed and I'm editing and I'm constantly on my screen, like you're not able to look at it with fresh eyes. You have to be able to look at it with fresh eyes. So that is also a challenge, being able to take your ego out the mix, take even like your love for art out the mix and look at it from an objective point of view. Like, hey, you should try this. You're being a little bit like you're doing this too much here. Like this has happened before. Like what's a way that you can take this in a new way? And I think too that to be able to challenge yourself is to be an artist. Is to be an artist to kind of consistently challenge yourself and be like, okay, how can I do this in a new way? How can I apply more inspiration in a new way? Like, what does that look like to do that? And that's challenging. And it make my head hurt sometimes. My head be pounding from the amount of like different perspectives I'm trying to look at. But Alhamdulillah, it always leads me to a beautiful point at the end. So the challenge is worth it. Again, like with hardship comes ease. With hardship comes
Look at
ease.
that. That's so awesome. And so, as you look back, what lessons have you learned from your creative journey thus far?
Mm. I would say that what I've learned has been you can take one experience, one perspective, one feeling, one thought, and make so much from it. You can make so much from it. I think I learned how to like not limit myself and to not let fear be an anchor for anything that I create. Um, there's ways you can talk about fear, but I don't want to be leading with fear, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want like doubt or anything to creep in when it comes to like the producing process. Also, too, something else I've learned during my creative process is like the moments, like the years before I became close to Islam, like the moments I was not leaning on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for like my inspiration. Like now I literally would pray asking for guidance from my art. Like I didn't lean on that before. So that is something that I've definitely learned within the past like 3, 4 years of like leaning further on. Cause I'm always so surprised and always so inspired. Like after I ask for the guidance, and then I'll sit and I'll just like be thinking, and then immediately something will come to my mind. I'm like, oh, the thing that I was stuck on, I figured it out. Like I figured it out. So that's something that I've learned along the way is to like know that a lot of my inspiration isn't gonna always come from me. I feel like before I was pretty selfish and egotistical with my art. Like it would be like all of its sources for me, and I figured all that. Like, no, it doesn't, girl. It doesn't. I think that that's a very limiting way of looking at art. And I think that that's something I did a lot in the past because I like to be honest, I got pretty cocky because I was good. Like I was winning all these awards in school and I was like, oh, winning all these art awards and getting paid and being in galleries. Like I was, oh, I'm good. Like I was like getting pretty cocky. So I was thinking that all of it was sourcing from me, but boy, was I wrong. I was so wrong. And so like that's something that I've learned crucially was that all of my inspiration does not source from me at all. At all. And that's very prideful of me to even think that in the past. And then something else is also too just to lean more on honesty. I also didn't do that. This is something that's like fairly new. Probably like the past 5 years, I've been leaning more on that. And yeah, and also too not to be afraid to like try different things. Like I always told my even though like I would never do this online ever. I used to be so afraid of dancing. I would tell myself I could not dance. But now I try to have, I'm leaning on to say that I try to have creative things that I do for just me that I like to do. So I like, will like, you know, have my sister play some drums and then I'll be dancing in my room. So I try to like have creative things just for me. The more I have like creative things just for me, it's like the more you do other creative avenues, it helps the other ones whether you know it or not. It's like being like exercising. So if you were to like lift weights, but you also do yoga and then you also you run regularly, like all those things help with your overall fitness journey. So if I am a creative and then like I start doing crocheting and I've never done crocheting before, whether I know it or not, that me learning to crochet is going to help the other avenues I have and create the other avenues I have creatively. So like that's something I feel like I've learned. So to be able to like know that all of my inspiration does not come from me, to not allow fear to be an anchor of my creativity, and also to have some creativity that is just for me, like creative avenues that's only for me. Like that has been something that's crucial, and I think that it's like allowed me to be more confident
Yeah,
in my
for
creative
sure.
abilities. Yeah.
Love that. So you shared a lot of lessons that you've personally learned, taking everything, from your experiences. Can you share advice for aspiring filmmakers who are listening to this, just based on everything that you sort of accumulated in your wealth of wisdom and knowledge?
Advice for other filmmakers. Um, I would say to don't be afraid of getting inspiration from other sources, and to also just build your source of inspiration. Like, who are you inspired by, and why? Ask yourself the why. The why is so important. The why will lead you to so many avenues of discovery, and discovery will lead you to creativity, and so on and so forth. I would also say to be true to yourself, and in order to be true to yourself, you have to know yourself. So don't be afraid of that, and like allow allow yourself to make bad work. It's bad is subjective, but allow yourself to make bad work. I've had a mentor tell me once, for film was like, I would much rather you have 1,000 terrible films and 5 good ones rather than just one excellent one. Because all those 1,000 that you made, you've learned so much from it. So you'll be able to accumulate more work from that. And so yeah, so allow yourself to do bad stuff because that's how you learn. Like it's, and I think that like from speaking through a perfectionist lens, loosen your grip. It's okay. It's okay to not know everything and to not get every single thing right. But like granted, like it's a balance. So I can understand like for me, I love what I do. So I'm going to make sure that it's well. Like I'm not gonna produce something I don't like. But I think allowing myself to loosen my like very tight grip, like I'm not even allowing myself to move. That helps a lot. So I would give the advice of just being honest, true to yourself, allow yourself to, oh, so sorry. Allowing yourself to be honest, allowing yourself to source different inspiration. Also, too, look at works that you may not ever look at. Like I would read books that I would never find myself actually reading, or I would like watch certain films that I would never think of watching, because you would find inspiration from a lot of things. Sometimes I even find inspiration from documentaries that have nothing to do with anything that I'm doing. But creativity branches from a lot of things, but it also branches from just knowledge. So like, and that's, I think the more knowledge you accumulate, you're able to like fine tune your style and then find out what you like, what you don't like. So definitely broaden your inspiration pool. Like, don't just do things that you only like. I think that, for example, when we were talking about like the films that I made in the past, but I was only watching coming to age rom-coms. I mean, my scope is pretty limited on like the things that I can pull from. So when you watch things that are completely out your realm and you wouldn't watch it, like I was watching something, I think I was watching like this chemistry like documentary, and I was actually getting a lot of inspiration from it, surprisingly. Like it has nothing to do with what I'm doing now, but allow yourself to step out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself. The more you challenge yourself, you'll be surprised because you are much more than you are. Yes, I would say that those are some tips that I would tell myself, and also to other aspiring or newly jumping in filmmakers, or even veteran filmmakers, maybe if they need the advice.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love to hear that. Well, thank you again for, like you said, I mean, to your point, you're sharing with us, being vulnerable about your process, ins and outs of your entire filmmaking experience, everything that you kind of put into a film. It's so beautiful, so amazing to hear. I have one last question that I love to ask my guests before they hop off and we conclude the episode. We've talked a lot. I mean, in the last 2 or 3 questions, we've talked a lot about lessons learned. So if this is redundant, I am sorry because you've already shared so much. But what is a lesson learned that you know now that you wish you could have told your younger self? And that can be anything, but anything that's resonated with you thus far that you wish you could have told your younger self.
No, for sure. I'm gonna try to say something that's not something I've said previously. So I'm gonna try to think of something new that I could have told my younger self. That you do not need external validation to feel confident in what you are creating. Um, that I that has been, and even I would even say now is something I still have residue of things that I'm having to work through, is like wishing for that external validation. So if I get like I can have a whole bunch of very, very sweet and positive comments, but then like 2 very negative comments. And why am I so focused on those when I have an abundant amount of good ones, And so not taking what other people's opinions or perspectives are to heart as a way to determine my capabilities. Like, and that can go even further than just art. Like, I think that external validation and really wanting that was something that I wanted a lot as a kid. And so I would tell myself if I had to sit her down, I would hug her and tell her, you do not need that. You do not need that. Lean on Allah's promise and lean on the ones who love you and consistently show up for you, and trust yourself. Because everyone's gonna probably out of 1,000 people, you're gonna have people that's gonna disagree with you. And you're not gonna have everyone, be on the same page as you, and that's okay. I think I would tell my younger self to find beauty in the different perspectives that other people may have, and to not internalize it and make it something that you have to hold on to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't please everyone. I learned that early on. Just head out, lock in, and try to please God, and hopefully everything will kind of like fix itself.
Absolutely.
So, well,
Inshallah.
that brings us to the official end of today's conversation. Thank you so much again, Nadifah, for
Absolutely.
sharing, for being so honest with leading, like you said, speaking to leading with honesty, being vulnerable, and sharing your entire process. So I really appreciate you coming on and chatting away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful. I'm so
Of
grateful.
course, of course. Well, listeners, you heard it here. We learned about filmmaking, the creative journey by our guest, Nadifah. You listened to everything that is anything about behind the lens, behind the scenes, and I hope you did learn so much in today's episode. Stay tuned for more episodes, and inshallah, I'll catch you next time with Coffee Chats with Aisha. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.